You're listening to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast with your host, Maggie Mogan.
Hi, small business owners. Welcome to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast, where we focus on creating brilliant breakthroughs for the small business owner. FYI, this is also the name of the #1 Amazon best-selling business book series for small business. It's titled Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner, and the subtitle is Fresh Perspectives on Profitability, People, Productivity, and Finding Peace in Your Business. You can get a digital copy or paperback, and you can get that right at Amazon. It's also at Barnes & Noble and a couple other great places. But today in the book series, the book that we're referencing is Volume 2, and that's the one with the emerald green cover. So today's conversation is with a #1 best-selling business author from that 2018 book. But I want to share right before I bring her on, I'd like to say hi, rock stars. My name is Maggie Mogan, and I'm a #1 best-selling business author and creator of that best-selling annual business book series. I'm also a professional master business coach and trainer at Brilliant Breakthroughs. So now that we have me out of the way, let's get on to our superstar for the day. Susan McCuisition, welcome and congratulations on being a #1 best-selling business author. You rock!
Thank you, Maggie. So great to be here with you again.
Okay, so Susan, we've had you share some wisdom with us over 3 podcasts already, and that's for everyone. You're going to want to write this down: episode 58, 71, and 78. So once you hear Susan talking about this, I know you're going to want to go back and listen to a couple of those other podcast episodes as well. So that's 58, 71, and 78. So Susan is bringing forward this really cool body of information. And I almost don't want to say anything about it, but let's talk for a moment, because in the 2018 book, Susan is the author of the 4th chapter, and it's titled 5 Ways to Bring Compassion into Your Organization, which is really cool. And I know that there's a topic that Susan wants to address today, and that's about what you stand for. And she's going to dive into that further. But I want to start by saying, our society, we here in America, we are founded on being fighters. We fought for our freedom, and we have this mentality, and it's a way of being, it's in our DNA, literally, that we are supposed to fight for our ideals. And that is really cool, but it can also create some issues if we don't do it in a good way. So, Susan, fighting for our ideals is a good thing, but sometimes it separates us. And I bet you have something to say about that, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about it, as usual, Maggie. You know me by now. So, I really am an eternal optimist. I believe that people are basically good. I think that 99% of us wake up in the morning with really good intentions, right? We want to go to work, we want to make a decent living, we want to take care of our families, connect with our friends, help out in our communities. I don't believe that we wake up intentionally trying to hurt other people, but inevitably we do.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and I think it's really, some of it goes back to what we talked about earlier, our biases, right? We don't understand our biases and how our perspectives exclude others. But it is also that tendency of wanting to kind of take up arms and fight for things. And I think right now that there has not been a more divisive or polarized time. I think that we really see that fighting for or fighting against, whatever you want to call it. We're seeing that now more than ever, right? Whether it's social turmoil, political turmoil, we can't escape it. It happens at every turn, and there's all kinds of stories about people being mistreated or excluded or harmed, and it makes all of us feel really stressed out in almost every aspect of our lives, and we carry that stress with us into work every day.
Okay, so I think everyone who's listening to this right now can say, oh, well, yes, that's exactly what's going on, right?
Mhm.
So my question for you is, should we focus more on supporting our interests?
I absolutely believe so. So I am a firm believer in what we focus on increases. And so when we spend all this time fighting against things, we feel overloaded and exhausted, and we can even feel very threatened about things, threatened to our very core. So we go around fighting against hate and fighting against discrimination and fighting against immigration bans. I would suggest that when we fight against, what we're focusing on is that stuff that we're fighting against. We fight against hate. What we're really focusing on is the hate. And so what I would encourage people to do is really make a shift. And it's a slight shift, but it's not necessarily an easy shift. A shift to standing for. So rather than fighting against hate, how about standing for love? Or rather than fighting against discrimination, how about standing for equity? Or rather than fighting against immigration bans, why not stand for human dignity? Because when we focus on things like love and equity and human dignity, we are focusing on and standing for those more positive aspects. It's the same, it's two sides of the same coin, but very different sides, right? Very different sides, very different focus.
There's a quote from Mother Teresa, and I know it was a popular quote even before she transitioned. And I'm not going to get it right, but we'll get the spirit of it. She said, please, whatever you do, don't invite me to an anti-rally.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Instead, invite me to something that I can support and I can be for, and I will be there, but I will not go to an anti. To validate your point, she understood the power of what you're saying. I wish I could speak it directly, but I can't. So I'm sorry about that, but it makes sense with what you're
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of validity, as we focus on what we want. I mean, anybody who does any kind of goal setting, right? You set the goals to focus on what you want. So in the same way, we want to focus on this. I think when we're so busy fighting for, the fact of the matter is we're all in this together. And when we're so busy fighting for, fighting against, fighting whatever we're doing, nobody escapes of the fight. Nobody escapes the battle unscathed because we are all in this together. And so whether you are a victim or a perpetrator or even just an observer, we do not escape these really harmful effects of fighting. And effects, some of the effects I'm talking about are things like hypertension, depression, even certain cancers have been connected to some of this stress that is involved with all of these things that we're busy fighting against. One of the most fascinating facts, to me in the work that I do, and I base everything in science. I love science. One of the most fascinating facts is that when we exclude people, or actually, let me turn that around. When we are excluded, the area of our brain that processes pain is the same area of that brain that processes the exclusion. And so this exclusion could be even just slight. Maybe we're not invited to lunch with the rest of the group. But the fact that we were excluded, the fact that we feel like we don't belong, it's the area, it processes as physical pain. And so, we may be the victim of that. We may be the person who didn't ask. And as we start to kind of recognize and feel that stress of, ooh, I left that person out. That wasn't intentional, right? And then we start to mull and focus on that, and we start to feel bad about that. And whether we're observing what's going on, there's these magical things in our brains called mirror neurons, and they actually mimic what we're watching. So if we're watching somebody pick up a pencil, it's the mirror neurons in our brain that are processing as if we were picking up the pencil too. So even when we're observing some of these things that are happening, we don't escape this. We're all in this together. And so we have to make sure that we do come together and we focus on those things that we want to focus on. We don't want to focus on the exclusion. We want to focus on the inclusion, right? And I think the other thing here is, who was it that said, you get the same thing, you do the same thing over and over again, you get the same result, right? We all kind of basically
Einstein talks about it being the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
The same thing, you get the same result. Why are you expecting something differently?
Exactly. You do the same thing over and over again. But I think we kind of get into our human ruts where, we're comfortable doing the same thing over and over again because we know what the result will be. And I think that's where we're stuck with diversity inclusion, with inclusive leadership, with cross-cultural competence. We're doing things the same way over and over again. Why wouldn't we expect that nothing has changed in our workplaces? Right? Why wouldn't we expect things haven't changed in our communities or our families or our relationships? It's because we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. In fact, there's some science that would even say that, our bodies are when we feel the emotion of that, our bodies are actually addicted to some of those negative emotions. And so it's kind of crazy what we do to ourselves. And so that's why it sounds easy to shift to the stand for and shift to the more positive, but it isn't necessarily so easy. I mean, we're fighting addiction within ourselves towards this. And so really the only way out is to go through this together and to really challenge each other to stand for these more positive things.
Well, I love that, because what you're talking about is we don't think often of addictions in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
Having an emotional hit is an addiction. Sometimes people do it through fear, other times they do it through substances. It doesn't matter. You can even have an addictive hit from being a runner, a marathon runner.
Absolutely.
It's perceived as positive, but it's still an addiction. And we are spending so much time and energy in fighting and being against something, instead of taking that same amount of intensity and putting it towards what we're for.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we started doing that instead, and that energy was shifted to the fore? I think, our emotions, I think I talked about this at some point in the past too. Our emotions are internal guidance system. So when we feel bad, when we see somebody being mistreated and we feel angry about that, that means something's going against our values. Right? Something's not matching up with how we believe the world should be. And so, again, we just want to we're addicted to that bad feeling. We kind of want to jump in there and start yelling and start arguing and take up all these arms when, all we can do is, actually the better thing to do is kind of say, oh, wow, that didn't feel very good. Let me see what I can do to shift this. And one of the best ways that we can do that is through some breathing techniques. There's an organization in Northern California called Heart Math. So for those of you listening, it's just what I said, Heart Math, M-A-T-H. And what they have found is that the electromagnetic field of the heart is 60, that's 60 times greater than that of the head. And so the heart sends the head signals that influence our perceptions and our emotions. So these positive feelings of standing for are more beneficial for us in terms of, I've mentioned our mental health, but also our emotional, our physical, and our spiritual health as well, than those negative feelings generated by fighting against. And so we can use our emotions as kind of that guidance system. Oh, this doesn't sit right for me. Okay, wait a minute. How do I shift this? And the way that we shift that is to actually just kind of slow down our breathing just a little bit more, just breathe a little bit more slowly than we're used to. And to focus our attention on our heart, and to imagine that that breath is flowing into and out of our heart. And what that does is it takes that focus away from the situation that's angering us. It brings that focus into our heart. It creates a coherence between our heart and our brain so that we can think much more clearly in that situation. And so then when we're thinking more clearly, we can make that shift to, okay, what is it that I want to stand for in this situation? And so it's really a process of self-awareness and self-discovery.
Wow. So this is fascinating because we're talking about human beings and living, and that this is very applicable in business because we think everything is so important and we have to do it all, but the truth of the matter is we stand for certain things more than others, and other things are going to support us better than others. And sometimes that's relationships. It could be with our business allies or people we hire. It could be with what we choose to get involved with. Oh, should I go do this summit? Should I go to this conference? What should I do? Right? There's all these choices that we have thrown at us all day long. And what you're saying is we can get out of our head and drop down our heart. And boy, that's not that many inches, but it's a long journey for us to start traveling and saying, oh, I can be with this in a whole nother way and figure out what best suits our organization or business, whatever it is that you are, in a good way. And it doesn't have to always be the analytical, because sometimes there's decisions that on paper look right, but they are not right. And we've all been there.
Yes.
And we're like, why did I say yes to this? Well, it appeared to be right, and it was far from. And had we slowed down, just like what you're saying, slow down your breathing, slow down your thinking. How do you like that?
Too.
Yeah. And just listen a little more as to what's going on and what it is that we need to be moving with. Oh my gosh, what a big shift that can be. And I know that I'm sort of stealing a little bit of your thunder, but let's talk more because we got a couple more minutes. Let's talk about how do we do this stand for thing?
Yeah, so I've been talking about this for years. In the article that I wrote is about compassion. My focus has been on compassion, compassionate diversity, inclusive leadership for years. And stand for is actually one of those foundational building blocks for compassionate diversity. I strongly believe in the necessity of standing for and finding those things that we stand for. And so as a result, what I've decided to do is actually, well, I've done a couple campaigns in the past, but I'm really going to take it up now because this message is now finally starting to get taken up by a few other people. I heard about it coming forward on a big stage at a conference recently. And so I think now may be the time for me to really take this up and create this campaign of power the power of standing for. And so what I want to do the next few weeks is talk about this some more, get people engaged in a conversation. I'll be both on LinkedIn and on Facebook, but get people involved on a conversation on what do you stand for and how do you do that. And so I've got a hashtag I've used for years, the hashtag stand for, but we've also got a hashtag power of stand for. I've got a powerofstandfor.com, so you can go out there and take the pledge, get some ideas, read a little bit more about my thoughts around this and how this is such necessary and foundational work, not only for our businesses and organizations, but for our lives in general.
Okay, so this is you not only continuing the conversation that you've been doing for years, but now amplifying it to take it to the masses.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and the hashtag stand for or hashtag power of stand for?
Yes, power
Okay.
of stand for and
And then
powerofstandfor.com.
powerofstandfor.com. Okay, so this is cool because this is a way for our listeners to continue to engage in this part of your whole conversation and really explore what they stand for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that'll streamline things, won't it?
I'm hoping so.
And then again, maybe not. Okay, Susan, so before we wrap up, because hard to believe we sort of have to do that already, what one or two things is it that we need to know to proceed? Besides,
Wow.
probably go check out your powerofstandfor.com.
Well, I think one of the things that I always encourage, and I think I've brought up in every single one of my discussions with you, Maggie, is recognizing our emotions.
Uh-huh.
There's again, an easy thing to say, not so easy thing to do. But those emotions are going to tell us where we stand on a particular subject or not. If we're watching the news at night and we're starting to get really aggravated, wow, something's going against your beliefs and expectations and your values, and figure out what that is, right? Figure out what that is so you can decide what you want to do to stand for. I think the other thing is watch our words.
Mm.
Our words have power. I personally have been on a journey the last few years to be very, very careful about what words I put after I am. Because we're naming ourselves with that, right? And part of compassion is self-compassion as well. And so this isn't easy stuff, recognizing where we're at in a situation, trying to shift how we're talking about things and all that. We have to have some self-compassion. So in this process, in this learning process, and in standing for, don't say things like, oh, I'm so stupid, or, oh, I can't do this. Watch your words and have some self-compassion and, own, yeah, I am strong. I am, I can do this, and be in that power through this shift. And that's going to help you all that much more.
Amen to that. Wow, thank you, because that is so powerful. I just heard this earlier from someone else about making sure that you watch your words because they do have power. And one of the places where I see that being the greatest offense right now is on social media.
Yes.
And people
Yes.
just start going at each other instead of staying on topic or just letting it ride. And it's like, why do we have to create arguments? We're not even talking about what the real issue was at the beginning of the thread. So it's sad, and it's very telling that we who are hearing this message need to help others become familiar with this message.
Well, and it's the words that create our focus. Again, whether it's that self-compassion piece and watching what you put after I am, but also, in what you're saying, to others, right? I don't know. I know we're at the end of time. Maybe I'll save my political correctness rant for later, but
that can be a whole nother one.
that can be a whole other topic. People might call it political correctness, but really it's about respect as we're engaging and talking to others, and choosing our words carefully makes us much more mindful and careful, and it puts the power in the right space when we're careful with our words.
Sounds like that might be something to touch on in our next episode.
Oh, I'm ready for it.
Okay, let's have you write that down so we know, because we have 2 more episodes with Susan, everyone. All right, so listeners, this is how you can learn more and engage with our #1 best-selling business author, Susan McCuisition. Start by reading Chapter 4 in Volume 2, about 5 ways to bring compassion into your organization. And that's Volume 2 of Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner. And you can also go ahead and check out the invitation Susan has. At the end of her chapter, she has an author page there, and she invites you to engage, and it's free, and it's very relevant to you as a business owner and you as a human on this planet. Plus, she also has all sorts of social media handles for you to go ahead and connect. And I'm saying Susan McCuisition very carefully, because we also have another Susan who's an author in the book. I'm not saying her last name so we don't confuse it. So here's something that's really cool. Right now, you can see everything about the book and how to get a hold of it, as well as directly email Susan McCuisition by going to our books app. And the app is brilliantbizbook.com. Oh, no, forget the .com. I'm talking about an app. Go to your app store and type in Brilliant Biz Book, all one word, and you can download us, and on there you'll see we have all sorts of goods about where we're showing up, what we're talking about. And this isn't just for this year's authors, it's for last year's authors as well. And all our podcasts are there. So when I told you Susan's former podcasts are 58, 71, and 78, you can go check those out too. But here's what I think is one of the coolest features on our app is we have a section that says click and ask an expert. And if you click on that, you'll see Susan McCuisition's name. Please go ahead and send her a question or a comment that you have, and it'll land in her inbox and she'll reply back to you. Right, Susan?
Absolutely, Maggie.
Okay, cool. So I want to thank you, Susan, because today you really brought it on. You took the time to break it down for us and then wrap it up in a way that we can use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. I always enjoy speaking with you.
Ditto. And listeners, we appreciate you listening to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast, where you learn about how to create more brilliant breakthroughs for your small business. Until we're back next week, shine brightly.